there, and welcome to my studio. I'm Nancy Harron, and this is Tole Time, not Tool Time. So if you guys were expecting to see tools, you're pretty much out of luck. So we're going to be painting on this one, and what we're going to do today is we're going to do this door crown down here. I'm going to take you right from the very beginning, what you need to do, and I'm going to fill you in on everything that you want to do on this, and we're going to go ahead and make this. This is something everybody can do. If you can learn how to type, you can learn how to do this painting. So let's get started. I went out in the woodworking shop, which is kind of a scary thing in itself, but I went out and I just cut this door crown. And in the pattern that comes with this project, you get the pattern of the door crown. So you can use this, you can cut it out of 1-inch pine. This was just a 12-inch board. You can cut it out of 1-inch pine. Or you can use Baltic birch, which is really nice too, and you can use like a 1/2-inch Baltic birch. It works really well. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to look at your wood, and you need to find out if you have any imperfections on it, if you've had to build it and you've got nail holes or screw holes or anything like that. If you've got this one here has a little gouge in it, I would just take wood filler and I would fill that in, and then I buy these little sanding pads just from the hardware store, and this is just a medium grit. This works really well. So I'd fill it in, let it dry, and then you come on over and you just sand it off like that, and you want it to be nice and smooth. All right, that would feel good had I actually done that. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, I have to seal my wood before I paint it. If I don't do that, what happens is the first coat of paint sinks into the wood, it raises the grain on my wood, and I no longer have a nice smooth surface to paint on. Plus, I lose that first coat of paint. It tends to disappear right into the wood. So what I'm going to use is, it's an all-purpose sealer, and every brand of paint, I'm going to use Legacy 1837 paints today. And every brand of paint that you use tends to have a sealer. So there's like Josania sealers, there's Ceramcoat has a sealer, Americana has a sealer. They're all basically the same kind of a thing. You're going to put them on here, and it's going to seal your wood. So what I would do with this, I've already done it on my other side here that I'm actually going to paint on. What I would do with this is I'd squirt it out onto my palette, I'd wet my brush into the sealer, and I just paint it on like this, nice and even, nice long strokes. Okay, then I let it dry, wash my brush out, because that's going to dry up really hard. Then I let it dry. And I get very impatient when I paint. I want to paint. I don't want to do all this playing around stuff. So I always have a blow dryer on hand. Let it dry. You've got to sand it again, because now what's happened is the sealer has gone into your wood. It has sealed the wood, but it has raised the grain up on the wood again. So you need to sand it down. So on you go, and you give it a little sand. Right? Your wood's sealed, you're ready to go. Now, I base coated this, and like I said, I've already done it on this side. I have base coated this in with taupe. So I took my taupe out, squirted some on my palette. I used a damp brush. This is a 1-inch wash brush. It works really, really well for this kind of stuff, but you can go to the hardware store. Pardon me, you can go to the hardware store and you can actually buy those little foam brushes, those little black foam brushes. You don't want to use them more than twice, because then they start to leave little spots on your project. You base coat it up. When you base coat, though, you cannot use full-strength paint. If you use full-strength paint, it leaves ridges on your wood because it's too thick for doing that. So you come into your water, and you have a damp brush. You would go in, you load your paint, and you would come on nice long strokes. Now, you should never be able to base coat anything in one coat. You want to put 2, maybe even 3 coats on, letting it dry in between each coat. All right, so we get it to this stage here. I don't know if you can see that. That's taupe. Now, I haven't covered it totally. I can still see a little bit of the grain in my wood here, and for what I'm going to do, that's all right. If I wanted it to be solid, then I would have put another coat of paint on here, and I would have come up with a solid finish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to smush this. Now this is like, same as when you do it on your walls, except smaller. I am not going to use a glazing medium on this, though, because it takes quite a while to dry, and I really don't want to spend all that time. I already told you I'm an impatient painter. So I don't need to. Always give your paints a shake the first time, and then pop them down. If you open them without popping them down, all the pressure builds up here, and your neighbor's wearing your paint. You don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do first of all, I have all my stuff ready that I need because this is going to dry fairly quickly. I have some plastic wrap, good old no name. I have my piece of wood all prepped and ready. I have my paint and I have water. I'm ready to roll. So in I go, and I am really going to, whoops, hold it, I lied. I'm going to do this first. I'm going to wet my project. Now I don't want this dripping wet, but I do need to have some water on it so that I can have this paint move around on here for me. If it's on dry, then it's just not going to smush. And heaven forbid it shouldn't smush on us. So over we go. Neil's going to learn how to paint today. He's running the camera, and he's the guy that's going to be the painting expert by the end of this. All right, now I'm into my paint. And what I've done is I've kept a really damp brush. It's quite watery, my paint here. It's down to a wash. And a wash is basically 80% paint. No, that's a lie. 80% water, 20% paint. And I'm going to come on, and I'm just going to really randomly flip this stuff onto my board. And you can see I'm not being really careful where it's going. And I'm reloading. I'm not worrying too much about it. But I've always got some moisture in my brush, and I have moisture on my board. Now I haven't totally covered it here. It's looking kind of messy. I like that. I'm going to do the old saran wrap. Let's get that off of there. Now I'm going to just take this, and I'm going to just drop it on my board. Just like that. And I want to cover the whole thing. So I'll just drop another little piece there. And I want to leave the wrinkles in it. I'm going to run my hands over it. And I've missed a little section here. There we go. This is quite a long board. It's one little blip is not going to do it. There we go. We're all covered in saran wrap. I'm just running our hands over it like this. Now, if you leave all these wrinkles in, that's what you're going to see on your board. That's going to be there. That's going to be real nice. You don't want to smooth it out, but you want to press your saran wrap into your board. And you just take this back, and you peel it off, and you get rid of it. I don't want to tip it up because it's going to run. And that's my background. Now what I've done in creating a background is I've started to anchor my pattern onto my board. If I don't do anything in behind and I don't do anything when I'm finished on this, my pattern can look like it's floating on here. But I've just created a little bit of interest. If you come on over here, you don't see it a lot unless you really look at it. But it's just created a little bit of interest in the background here. So we need to let this dry. And I have my trusty blow dryer. I'm going to dry it up here. There we go. It's dry, and it's ready to have its pattern put on. Now, when you're putting a pattern on, what you want to do is you want to take the line drawing, is what this is called, out, and you want to get a hold of some tracing paper. And tracing paper comes in booklets, or you can buy it in a roll. I have both, so on this one I've used the roll. So all you do is take your tracing paper out, you lay it over top of your pattern like this, and you would trace onto your tracing paper. You don't want to try and use this on your board because you can't see where you're going to position it. So you're going to trace this all out on here, and that's what I've done ahead of time. And then you take this tracing, and this is what you're going to place on your board. And I'm really not good at centering, so I'll just kind of eyeball this on as best I can. All right. Then you would need a handy-dandy Scotch tape here. This Scotch brand magic tape, the one with the green tartan on it, that works the best. That doesn't take off your paint after you've painted. And I'm just going to lift this up, put a little piece of tape under here where it's not going to interfere. And now my pattern's not going to go anywhere. It's going to stay put. I think I'll do that on both sides because it will move on me. If it moves, it's very easy to fix because you can see through. You can see where you've been, so you can reposition your pattern. It's just a pain in the patootie to have it move, so we don't want to do that. So there we go. Now, how the heck do we get our pattern on here? The tracing's on here, but there's nothing on our board yet. Well, we have a couple of things here. This is called graphite paper. And it's an artist's thing. Don't use carbon paper, it just smears. And you can't get it off. This we can take off when we're done if we don't paint over something. This is called graphite paper. It has a kind of a grayed side and a black side on that one. Or if you were on, say, a dark color, say you're on navy blue or something like that, you can use white. And it's beige on the outside. All right, I can do this. And it's white on the inside. And it would be the white side that you would put down. Now, depending on how good your eyesight is and what you want to put on here, I'm going to use the dark one today. I'll hang that back up. Now, what I do is I take the dark side. You can see that this one's a little bit lighter. I take the dark side. Sounds like Star Wars, the dark side. And I'm going to slide that under there. Right? It's not big enough to stretch all the way across, but that's okay. I can move it. And I take a stylus. You can use a pencil, a crochet hook works, anything along that line that's going to give you a small end. But this stylus comes in very handy. And what you're going to do is very lightly, you're going to trace your pattern. But you get one thing traced on there, like I just traced that strawberry. Lift it up, have a look, make sure your pattern is actually coming out on your board. If it's not, you got your paper in upside down. And away you go. And you're going to trace out the pattern. Now don't put in any inside detail. And don't put on any extra lines that you probably don't need. I'm not going to bring the lines up and into these little leaves because that's just one more thing I have to try and follow. And I can fake those in. So I just come along and I'm going to trace on my pattern. Now I'm not going to put on any inside detail because I'm just going to come back in and base coat that out. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put it on and then just get rid of it. And you can see that I keep checking where my pattern is because I'm never totally sure if I've got it all going on here or not. So I just, because I'm taped, I can do this. I can lift it up and have a little look at what's happening under there. I'm not going to move my pattern any great distance. I need to know whether I can press a little bit harder or maybe not quite as hard as what I was. And that's going to depend on how my board has dried up. And because I blew dry it, it might not be consistently dry across it. I hope it is, but I might have places that I need to go back into and reapply the pattern. So that's why I check on it all the time. Now here's a word of advice. I'll tell you what to do and you'll just ignore what you see me doing. When you do straight lines, you probably should use a ruler. But if you were doing a house or something, you would want to use a ruler because you'd have very crooked walls and you don't want to pay your carpenter for that. So a little terracotta pot, it's a little bit different. I think we can, whoop, missed a leaf. I think we can get away with having a little bit of a waver in there. At least I hope so. Now I'm putting these curls on, but not the little stems. And these curl lines are going to be just a suggestion. of where I want those to go. I don't need to follow exactly on top of those lines, because then you just get frustrated, because that's very hard to do, to stay on top of a line with your liner brush. So if you put those in, remember those are just vague suggestions on where you want those lines to go. They're just kind of a hint. All right, we're almost there. I think Neil thinks we won't have enough material, so he's making you watch me trace. We will, trust me. All right, what's this looking like under here? Okay, this guy needs to be a little bit darker. I'll fake him in there. All right, I think we're here. I'm just going to peel off my pattern. I don't know if you can see that, but there's my pattern. This is what I was talking about in here. My board was maybe not quite as dry as it was over here or over here, but my pattern's still there, and it's enough that I can see what's going on here. Now, you may find that somewhere along in your painting that you need to put your pattern back on top if you've got inside detail that you actually need to have on here after it's base coated. So you always want to keep this handy, at least. So I'm just going to put it there. Now, you can see on this piece over here, we have ferns up in behind, and I'll have to have a peek at where we're going here with them. Ferns are just a background filler, but if you look at the pattern here, all I've given you are little dotted lines where the ferns go. We're going to do another one of those faking things in here. They're over here, these little dotted lines. And if you look, that corresponds with these little ferns. And that's the first thing we're going to put on. So to do that, I'm going to use a very small flat brush. These are legacy brushes as well. And they're very nice to use. There's all sorts of different brands of brushes, but I quite like these. The ferns we're going to put on, we're going to put them on in bay leaf, which is this one. Haven't used it, got to give it a little shake. Now, you don't need any great amount of paint. This is lots for any given time. Unless you're doing a large amount of base coating, you don't need any more than that. That's probably more than I need down. Acrylic paints dry very fast, so you don't want to have all these dried out globs all over. Just going to put some water on my palette here in case I need it. Just a couple little dots. All right, what I'm going to do for these ferns, because I didn't give myself any lines, I'm just going to look at my pattern and see approximately where they go. Right, so I need to water this paint down. So what I'm doing is I have water on my brush. I'm going to come in and I'm just going to pull a little bit of paint out from the edge of that puddle. I don't want to mess this up because I might need that for something else. So what I've done is watered this paint down. I've thinned it out. It's quite a bit thinner than what this is. I'm going to touch on my paper towel. Always have a paper towel. Neil was asking me about my Q-tips, so I have to tell you about my Q-tips. These are your eraser, and Q-tips and water don't work, but Q-tips and spit do. So you suck on a Q-tip and you can rub off whatever you need to get off of here. So on my pattern, I'm just going to lightly give myself kind of that dotted line happening there, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create these little fern leaves, and I want them to be fairly light. I'm not working with a full strength paint by any means. I want them to be fairly light. So I'm going to come in where it begins. I'm going to slide up the center. I'm going to press as I go. Wiggle, 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 moving out, and slide off the tip. And I'm going to continue to do that up here. I'm going to leave a little bit of a gap, slide on the chisel edge, wiggle, wiggle as I come out, and bring it up. Slide up, wiggle, bring it up. I'm going to follow this little line that I've given myself to get the shape here of these ferns. And as I come towards the top, like in any fern, my little leaves are going to get shorter. So that would be one side. Now, to do the opposite side, I have to turn the board around. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to slide up, press, wiggle, wiggle, and pull out. Fern leaves come directly across from each other. Some leaves you're going to see do this. fern leaves tend to come directly across. At least these ones do. So I'm going to come across from each other, wiggle, wiggle, and slide her up. Pulling these strokes towards myself. The last ones I kind of pushed away because of the direction of the board. There we go, and I'm going off the tip. There's a fern. Okay, now according to my pattern, I have another one that's going to come out here. Now this is just background that I'm putting on. Every time you put something on, it sticks out like a sore thumb. So the more that you put on top of this, like the next time we paint in other leaves or the daisies or whatever, these ferns will drop back to where they actually should be. So we don't panic too much that they're maybe a little bit more than what we want at this point. Of course these aren't. These are absolutely perfect, but they might be. They might be more than what you think you want on there. So we're going to create these ferns, and we're just not going to take a whole bunch of time on them because they are background. They're going to be interesting, but they are background. I'm going to slide and wiggle, and out it comes. Now, these little fern leaves, the size of them will depend on the size of brush you're using. Like I said, I'm using a number 2 flat, so that makes them very nice and thin. Doesn't make them look like they're these huge, massive ferns that are taking over the board. All right, where do we have another one here? I'm painting upside down, so I'm going to have one come out there. So, once again, here we go. And I'm not worried about coming into my other pattern. The only spot maybe that I don't want to come into is over my daisies. But these leaves are all going to be base coated out, so it doesn't matter whether I'm pulling in and up and over those. Actually, it's kind of nice if you do because it gives the effect of actually having that fern tucked in behind. Now every time I come back here and reload, I'm reloading into this paint that I have thinned down at the side of my puddle of paint here. I'm just about out. I'm going to have to make a new little wash of paint there in a minute. But, all right, where's this guy going? He's coming out from this little terracotta pot here. Whoops. Rip my microphone off. That would not be a good thing. Some things are good things. That would not be a good thing. All right, and this guy's going to wiggle, wiggle, and I'm pushing these strokes away on one side. And on the other side, I pull them towards myself because I then turn my board around. I don't ever want to learn how to do 900 different strokes if I don't have to. And I never want my hand to be uncomfortable while I'm doing these. This should just be fun to do. There we go. Oh, it's looking beautiful. Just looking great. I'm going to make up another little puddle of paint here, so I put more water down, pull a little bit more paint from this main puddle, and out we go. All right, I'm lost. Let's throw one in over here. I need something over on these corners of my board so it doesn't look dull out here. Your ferns are not going to look like your neighbor's ferns, and they're not going to look like mine because everybody will touch their board and pull their strokes differently. But as long as your ferns all look similar, as long as they all look like you've kind of picked them off the same plant when you were doing this, then you'll be just fine. There we go. All right, what have we got here? We need to go to this side, and what's happening over there? All right, we need one out here. Kind of balance that side. So far, so good. You can see how I keep flipping my board around. All day I'll flip this thing to make sure that I'm pulling whatever stroke I'm doing, I'm pulling it in a comfortable manner. I don't ever want my hand to get in my way. I don't ever want to have to be painting on this side. You want to keep your hand free and clear of your work so you can actually see what you're doing. That's always a good thing if you can see what you're doing. So that's the first step. We've got our ferns in there. Now, with your brushes, make sure that you do a little bit of cleaning. each time you use it. And then at the end of the day, you're going to take a little bit of soap in the palm of your hand. You're going to do this with your brush, and you're going to take it by the bristles and by the handle. You're going to wiggle it. And you're going to wiggle it until these bubbles come up nice and clean, right? So you're going to rinse it, and away you go again, and wiggle, wiggle, and it's going to clean your brush. Then what you do is you come into clean soap on your hand. You're going to just drag your brush through it like that, reshape it how it should be shaped, put it away. These all clean at the end. All right, so we have ferns in there. So now, according to this, we want to do our large leaves. And our large leaves are these ones that are sitting in behind the daisies. These guys in here. So we're going to base coat those in. And we are going to base coat those in, what did I tell you to use? I had to keep my instructions because you never know. Evergreen. Evergreen, good choice. When you're base coating something in, like I said before, you need to have some moisture in your brush. You also want to use a brush that is appropriate to the size of whatever you're base coating in. If I were to use this little tiny number 2 flat on these big leaves, I'd be here for a long time trying to get those because it's just too small. So I'm not going to use that one. The other thing too is never use your shader brushes for base coating. It wears down the hairs. You don't want to do that. So I've got this little number 6 flat that I do a lot of base coating with. And I've got moisture on my brush. I come into the side of the paint and I touch and press and pull. And I do this with the brush. Pull it towards me, flip it, pull it towards me. What that does is that loads the paint right inside your brush. I'm going to sit down to do this. Now I'm going to pick out some leaves here. When I base coat, a couple of different things. You want to base coat in the direction that something actually grows. Like these leaves grow up and down. They don't grow across. So base coating it across just loses the whole feel of the leaf. So you don't want to do that. You're going to base coat it from, I call the wide end, the butt end, and then up to the tip. Or from the tip to the butt end. You're just going to slide it up in there, trying to keep the tip on the leaf. Now your first coat is going to be fairly blotchy. And it will be blotchy because we have thinned the paint down a bit, and that's what you want. That's a good thing. It's not going to look great, that first base coat. I always go back in and get some more water when my brush feels like it's pulling. I want to go into that daisy area there a little bit. And I use my brush, and up I come. Now, on these two, you can see that they overlap. And I could have gone in and I could have painted this as one giant green blob, but you don't want to do that because then I lose the feel of each leaf, right? I don't want to have to put my pattern back on. I want to do the least amount of that I absolutely have to. So I'm just going to take some time and I'm going to base coat this in. This is what it's going to look like with the first base coat on it. Remember I said it's not going to look great? This is what it's going to look like with the first base coat. So this is what you should have at this point. So what you want to do is you want to make sure it's really dry. Use your blow dryer, but make sure everything's taped down when you do it. Things tend to fly. And come on back in, base coat it again, and chances are you're going to need to base coat it a third time. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to finish that up and I'm going to let it dry. So you've learned how to base coat, you've learned how to smush, and you've learned how to do ferns. I think that's pretty good for a first go round. So I'll finish this up, and next time when we come back, we're going to do the shadows and the highlights on our leaves. We're also going to do a second highlight, which is going to lift your leaves up and above the one in behind it. You've got leaves that overlap. We're going to lift those out. We're going to go on to, well, let's check the old trusty, the small leaves and vines. Yep, we could do those. And we'll probably get our strawberries done next time too. So we're going to learn how to do the shadows and highlights on the strawberries and how to do a little bit of dry brushing as well. So that'll really make them come up and be nice and round. So I'm going to continue on base coating, and we'll see you next time. welcome to Tole Time. I'm Nancy Harron, I'm your host. And last week on Tole Time, we had got our base coating done on our back board. We'd prepped our board, we got our base coat on. We also smushed it, and we put on our little ferns. And when I left you, I was just getting into the boring task of base coating. So what I did while I was away, I did the base coat on my large leaves, which was in bay leaf. And I thought to get us just a little farther ahead, I would do the base coating on the strawberries, which was in Coronado Red. That was this one right in here, Coronado Red. All right, and I have on my large leaves, I have probably 4 coats on here just to make sure I got a nice coverage. And on my strawberries, I think I have 3 coats. So what we're going to do today is we're going to shadow and highlight our leaves, and we're going to shadow and highlight our strawberries. And we'll see how far we get on this. On this, to do this, I'm going to float my highlights and shadows. I do most of my shadowing and highlighting with floats. I'm going to show you how to load your brush and what the effect is down on your board. Unless I state in my patterns that the shadowing or the highlighting is done somewhat differently, it will always be done with a float. The only other way that I really truly do it is when I use a dry brushing technique, which we will also use on the strawberries. We are going to put our first highlight on our leaves, and we're going to highlight the tips on both sides of our leaves, and we're going to use 1837 green here. Always give your paints a shake at the beginning of the day because they do separate. Tap it down so it's not up here and going to pop out at you. And when you float, I'll move this over so Neil can see what I'm going to be doing here. When you float, you only need, I call it a pin drop of paint. That's all you need. You don't need a lot of paint down there. You don't want to squeeze out half your bottle of paint because you're just not going to pick it up on your brush. When I float, what I need to have on hand is I need a piece of paper towel, and I need my palette paper. Now, if you don't have palette paper at home, if you have contact with a butcher store, or you know that brown paper wrap that they wrap your meat in, on the inside it's waxy. And if you flip it and use the waxy side, it works very much like palette paper. And you need something like this to get your brush to work, to move the paint across your brush. You can use something like a margarine lid. You can use the lid off of an ice cream pail, which is a very tasty way to come up with a palette, but it doesn't work as good as palette paper. So what you do is we need to dip our brush in water. We need to leave about half the water in our brush to float. You can't float without water. So there's 2 ways you can do this to adjust the water. You can take your paper towel and you very gently, and I say gently, set your brush on your paper towel. You watch your bristles go dull because when they come out of the water, they're shiny. When they go dull, you will have the right amount of water in your brush. If you drag it on the back of your hand, you're going to have a little bit of moisture come out. That's the right amount of water. Or you can take it between your fingers like this, and you can lightly squeeze, and you're going to come up with the same result. The trick is we're going to leave about half the water in our brush. All right? So I tend to do this, or you can tell by my brush basin it's pretty disgusting. I drag my brush up the side of it all the time too. So here I go. This is where we need to be to see this. I'm going to adjust the water on my brush down to half. I'm going to come in on one of the corners. This is called the chisel edge of your brush, this flat in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load on one of the corners, and I'm going to come in like that, pick up paint on the corner. Now what I'm going to do is come over to my palette, and I'm going to come down like this, and I'm going to lean the handle of my brush out, if I'm right-handed, which I am, out to about the 3 o'clock position. It's going to be out here somewhere, out to about the 3 o'clock position. If I'm left-handed, and I had to teach myself how to paint with my left hand because I had people that were left-handed, my brush is going to lean out to about the 8 o'clock position. And it doesn't need to lay flat, but see where the handle's pointing? It's not up at 12. It's kind of out at 8, or, paint's at my thumb here, kind of out at about 3 or 4 o'clock. Now, here we go. We're going to touch on our palette, and we're going to press. And if you look at the back side of my brush, the clean water side of my brush, that's where the pressure is. That's where the most pressure is. I'm going to push it away a few times. The water is going to release out of the back side of my brush. It's going to move into the paint slightly, and it's going to soften the paint. See how I pull it towards myself a few times, and I push it away a few times. What I've got here now is a really nice soft float. I have no harsh line left on this side. Whatever I see here is going to happen here. There's like no magical little toll fairy that corrects it as it moves over to my board. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, so now I've talked enough that I no longer have any paint or water on my brush. Here we go again. You stay bumped up against your paint. You don't go here, 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 here. You just stay up against that paint, paint to paint. Don't crisscross it, just bump it. And as soon as it goes soft, bingo, there it is. And it just changes that fast. Then what I tend to do is I just touch very gently on my paper towel like that. And what that does is that just controls any excess stuff happening out the back of my brush. I call it ghosting. It just controls that. Okay, I'd love to paint standing up, but I can't. I have to sit down, so now Neil has to move. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the highlight to my leaves. And I want to bring it out on both sides of my leaf. But I want to pull this stroke towards myself. So I'm going to touch and press very, very lightly, very softly, pop this highlight out just like that. And I'm just going to touch where I've lifted off my brush. Now, I don't know if Neil can see that. Can you see that? Ooh, we are good. All right. I only want to do one side of each leaf first, because if I come back in and now do the opposite side of this leaf, which I'm going to in the end, but while it's still wet, I'll literally erase that. So I don't want to do that. So here I go. And when I'm on my project, I have no pressure on my brush. Here I need to have pressure when I'm walking it or working it into my brush. Over here, I don't want any pressure at all. Right? So some of these strokes I'm going to pull towards myself, and some of them I'm going to need to push away. I want that paint to stay to the center of my body so that my hand doesn't get in the way. I don't want my paint over here. I can't see what I'm doing. Now when I float, I like to go in and I like to put them on fairly softly to begin with. This is where the old Q-tip comes in handy again. Remember, this is our eraser. Q-tip and spit. And no, please don't spit on your project. That's just disgusting. You just suck on it. And you know what? Go and buy the absolute cheapest Q-tips you can find, because if you don't, if you buy the really good quality Q-tips, which is wonderful to clean your ears with, but in your sucking on it, you get cotton in your teeth. It's not a pleasant thing. So I'm going to highlight one side of each leaf. Now I'm using a very large flat brush. I am using a number 16 here. And for most of my ladies, when they start painting, there we go, that floats nice and soft. When they start painting, I usually start them on a 12 flat, nothing smaller than a 12. Or if they choose, they can go on to a 1/2 inch angle brush. I like flats at this point, but I never say never, because a couple of years ago all I painted with was angle brushes, so I guess it just depends on what I've got going at that point in time. So you can see that I am reloading it. This is a very soft color, but this is our first highlight. I just want to, whoops, I was about to send my coffee flying. I just want to introduce this highlight in here. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to do it a second time. So much for my tape too. You can see how I'm moving my board all the time here. I don't want my hand to be in some weird and wild position, because after a while that really gets tough on your wrist. You don't want to be doing that. So some will pull towards myself and some will push away. It really depends on where your leaf is sitting. Now this leaf is actually, you can't really see it, but I'm going to let you see it here in a minute, because there it is. It actually sits on top of another leaf. If you look at the pattern, you can see that. that goes down, right down in here. These leaves overlap. So what I've done is dropped a highlight on this side of this leaf, and it has lifted it above this leaf. What happens with highlights are they pull things toward you or pull things out, and shadows push things away. So if you just kind of think of that, highlights are lighter than your base coat color and shadows are darker than your base coat color. That'll kind of keep you in the right frame of mind there. Floating is how we're applying it and also how we're loading our brush. All right, so I've got one side done on each. And now if I go back to the beginning where I started over here, I can now come in and do the other side because that first side is now dry. And I got to do the old board spin thing here. I'm going to put that other side in there. And sometimes when you put on your shadows and highlights, I like to do them twice if I can. Because if I put them on once and I put them on softly, I have the option of going back in and actually strengthening them. And that's what happens when you go in a second time. Don't ever think if you get it on there too strong, by coming over top of it again, you're going to fix it, because you're really not. You're just strengthening the color, and you might even be compounding the problem. But if you get them on there soft enough, you still need to be able to see them, but soft enough that you have the option of going back in and strengthening them, then you're in control of your paint, and your paint's not in control of you. So far, so good. My hand's in the way here. Neil can't see what I'm doing, but oh well. All right, let's get this side going. Now I'm going to lift that one as well, and that one is the center of the three. This one's over top of that one's over top of that one. And I've just lifted it up there. Okay, now because I'm actually going to add a second color to this one for my second highlight, I'm not going to worry about coming back into this and doing it a second time. Like I said, I like to do my shadows and my highlights twice. But this time, I'm going to do them twice, but with a different color. So my first color was 1837 green. My next color is going to be caribou, which is this kind of goldy yellow color. What I'm going to do with this caribou, I only need a little bit again, I'm going to actually really lift these leaves up and above the ones that are in behind them. I'm going to come in and do these, and I'm going to float it again. So I adjust my water, go in, pick up my paint, touch down here, press. If I don't press, I could be here till the cows came home. I'm going to be here a long time. And there it is, it's soft. Right? No harsh line. Touch on there. And now I'm ready to go. So now I need to decide which ones I want to lift up. And this is obviously one of them, because that's these guys here that are overlapping. And I'm going to just put this caribou on. And you're going to think, holy schmoly, that's bright. If you have a look at it, it just lifted up and above that other leaf. Now every time you put something on your board, it tends to stick out like a sore thumb. So what you want to do is not get all depressed about that. You just have to keep in your mind that the next thing I put on is going to stick out like a sore thumb, and you're not going to see that one anymore. And eventually everything will fall back where it should be. Or that's the theory. That's what we're aiming for. We're not sure if that'll happen, but we're definitely hoping that will be what we want it to be. All right, I've got those guys there, and this guy's overlapping too. Is he dry? Yep. Don't paint over wet paint. It tends to peel itself off. So, oh, beauty. You look marvelous, darling. All right, so what we've got here is we have some of these little leaves lifting up over and above the other ones. Now, to make this a little bit interesting, I can come in here, because there's nothing else happening there. I can come in and just lift a portion of that leaf up a little bit. And you see, I get my finger down here on the board. When you come in and you float, you tend to leave a little bit of water behind, and if you just touch it, it just lifts off. Now, I don't want to do this one again, because I don't want to lift it. Well, maybe I lied. I'll just pull it out here, away from that, just like that. But I didn't do it down here. I don't want to put it on the same level as what's happening here. Let's give this guy just a little bit of a lift. Same thing. I'll just bring him out here. Now I'm doing my highlights before I do my shadows. When we put a highlight on, it tends to leave a bit of a chalky end behind. Now you won't be able to see it in these colors too well. I think I'll leave that guy alone. You won't be able to see it in these colors too well, but it does leave a bit of a chalky end behind. And if we put our shadow on first, say this is our shadow, and then slapped our highlight over top of it, we'd still have that chalky end showing. So if we go ahead and we put our highlight on first and then our shadow, we're going to be able to clean up most of that. So we're letting this dry, and I'm not bringing out my blow dryer because it was blowing my stuff all over the last time, so we'll just let it dry. We're going to do the shadow on these leaves is going to be in what I call, well, what is called, it's called a brush mix. I don't want to put down a pile of black green and into it a pile of evergreen, because then I'm going to end up with a gob of paint like this before I come up with the color I want. All right, you always get too much of one and not enough of the other, so you add and then you're kind of messed up going the other direction. So a little bit of black green and a little bit of evergreen. Now evergreen was our base coat color. No, that's a lie. The bay leaf? Oh, it doesn't matter. This works. Neil will have to take that out. Maybe not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to float this again. And I'm going to come into the evergreen and pick it up on my brush. And then I'm going to come directly into the black green right on top of that and pick that one up too. Come over here, touch and press, and my color changes right in my brush. Now one other thing that's kind of cool about doing a brush mix, see how soft? There it is your colors never stay the same. You get some interest like that. Now where this shadow is going to go, it's going to go on things that are being overlapped. So this leaf overlaps this one, we're going to come in behind it and just scoot this up like that and around like that. And this is where my Q-tip comes in. Just going to clean up my little overlaps there. And there's a shadow in there. Now I also need to come into the base of my leaf where my daisy petal is going to come over. Because when my daisy petal actually gets in there, it will overlap that leaf. So consequently, you will have a shadow in there, like that. And pick up a little bit more paint. So I have a little bit darker color here. Turn our board around again, because remember I said I don't like my hand doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. I'm going to come in, basically behind the daisy petals. I'm following the shape of the daisy petals. Just tap it in there. I'll come in and clean up my little overlap there. And there it is. There you go. Have a look at that. Our shadows have started in behind those. If you look at these guys and then look at these guys that don't have any shadows, you can see that it's starting to push the leaves back a little bit on that. So we're going to go in and we're going to shadow all these guys. And it really doesn't take long to do this, because if you press very softly on your brush on your project, your float's going to go for quite a long time. You don't have to keep reloading it. So far. Now you need to tuck into all these little daisy petals here, because when we get those painted on, those really are going to cause a shadow. And we can go back in and strengthen that after we get the daisies on. We have that option of going back in there and doing that. Now you can see that I don't clean my brush a whole lot. I just tend to go back in and pick up more water. If I have a good float going, meaning it's not all the way across my brush, it's not messed up my whole brush, I just pick up a little bit more water and go ahead, and I can still get that nice soft float, and there it is. All right, let's get these guys separated here. My paint is towards the daisy petal so that it's dropping the color there. Come up, and I'm going to come up behind that leaf right there. And I want it just a touch darker because that guy is really far behind. He's back by three things here. There we go. Just drop him back a little bit more. All right, that's better. We'll just lighten back up to what we were using for this next fellow. And come on in. And we're going to come up behind this other leaf. There we go. Get up in there. Clean up my little ghosting here. You want to be on the biggest brush that you can handle. The wider the brush, the softer your float is going to be. Don't think that if you go on to a little tiny brush you're going to have more control, because you really don't. You don't have more control at all. I'm getting some ghosting happening here, which tells me that the back of my brush is starting to get a little bit dirty. So I'll finish this. And you want your whole brush down on your project, because hopefully, this is a good time to tell you this after I just said I've got paint in the back of my brush, hopefully all you have in the back of the brush is water. So if you find that you don't have just water in the back of your brush, you go in, clean it, come on out, readjust your water again. Get rid of the water on the ferrule so it doesn't roll down and mess up your float. Into the green, into the black green, touch and press, and here we go. And there it is, soft. I don't have any harsh line left showing, which means I can go on and do my floating. Now this is another one of those things that I like to do twice. It just makes it look a lot softer if you can put your color on twice. When you put the first float on, if you could take a little bit of a magnifying glass, you would see that it kind of comes on like pop, 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 pop. I mean, it doesn't show so much on your project, but if you turn around and do it a second time, all that paint seems to catch the second time around, catches in all those spots that it looks like it has missed the first time. So that just makes it look so much softer if you can get in there and do it a second time. Plus, you're doing that strengthening thing again. Alrighty, this is looking good. Such a star. Such a star. All right, and we'll just lift this last leaf up and over. Whoa. That's not what you want to hear your instructor say. And that way. Clean it up. All right, that would be the first shadows that are on there. Let me have a look at those. Now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do some of them again, but I'm going to try and get them a little bit darker. So that means I'm going to pick up a little bit more black green than I did the last time. And I don't think I need to actually strengthen all of them. They're not looking too bad, but there are some like this one here that could be just a touch darker. Because when my daisy gets on there, I'm going to have it drop back and I want it to actually move when I do that. This one here looks like it could come up just a touch too. Let's turn my board this way so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. We're going to go like that. And there's that shadow. Oh, yeah, that's better. There's that shadow right there. This one here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drop it into these daisy petals just a little bit more. Now you can see my whole brush is down on my board. If I don't do that, I don't get a float. And there's no point in using a brush this size if you're not going to be down on your board. If you're going to be up like this, you might as well use a liner brush. It's not going to do you any good to have a big wide brush. And you do actually have a purpose for having this big wide brush on your board. That's to get it to be soft. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. All right, there's our shadows. Now, we need to let these dry. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull a float line up the center of each leaf. And we're going to use this shadow color. And what this should do, well, here's the theory again. What this should do is it should bend our leaf a little bit. Our leaves are looking very flat right now. It's not going to bend it right in half, but it's going to give it a little bit of a dip into the center. So I'm going to pretend that my light source is up on the top of my project. So it's going to be actually up here. Right? So when I come back here, what I want to do is I want to have my float floating to the bottom of my leaf. So my color is going to bump into the center of the leaf, but look where the brush is. It's going to float to the bottom of the leaf. Okay? And I'm just going to come up the center. But I'm not coming up absolutely straight. I'm going to give it a little bit of a scoop. And I can push it up or I can pull it down. It doesn't matter. But what's going to happen is it's going to give that leaf a little bit of motion. It's not now laying out totally flat. You can look at those two as compared to this guy. These guys have a little bit more life in them than this fellow does. Right? I like to come from the butt end, the wider end, up into the tip. I find that easier for myself. Now that doesn't mean that that's the only way to do it. You might find that coming from the tip down is easier for you. It doesn't matter. Whatever way you can get there, you just get there. Now see on my palette here how my paint is not like 6 feet long? It's just an inch, maybe 2 inches max. It's out. You don't have to draw your paint way, way out, because the farther you take it on your palette, the more you paint your palette and don't float it in your brush. So you want to be careful that you're not way, way out on your palette here. See, I'm keeping in mind that my light source is up here. Oops, there's that ghosting out the back. We'll just clean that up. And up we come. See how easy that is? Just like a little eraser. Now when I get up here, this is just a little confusing because now my light source is here and I want to do this leaf and this leaf. Well, I'm going to flip the side. This I've got it floating down. This I'm going to actually have it float this direction because I'm just going to pretend. Because I designed the pattern, I can do that. I have that prerogative. All right, and this guy's going to stick out that way. I'll come back in and clean these up. Now, you don't want to leave the stuff inside your daisies until you get them all done and come back because it's dry and you've just kind of messed up your project. Although we are going to paint those daisies in, it's just better to learn how to clean up after yourself on your board. All right, we're going to go back into the highlight color, which is this 1837 green. I'm going to draw out our liner brush. I have to pick up the project for this. Yes, that's what I thought we did. All right, we're going to do some little tiny vein lines in here. So I just want a little bit more new paint. This one, if you look at it, it's started to cap over. I don't want to mess around and break in there. I haven't wasted anything but a pin drop of paint. I'm on a liner brush. Let's unfuzz this. I'm on a liner brush. And there's very few hairs in this liner brush. So it makes it a little bit tougher to work with, but it's not totally tough. You just have to think a little bit. When you use a liner, you need to thin down your paint. So I do the puddle out here of water, a little bit too much, and I pull paint into that puddle and I create a whole new consistency of paint. So I'm going to load from here. This is one of those blah, 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 yada, yada, yada scenes. And what I want to have happen is I want my brush to change color, but not size. If it changes size, then I know my paint is too thick. But if it hasn't, then I'm laughing. I'm doing good here. Then I have my paper towel, my trusty paper towel, and I just touch on there to get rid of that first drop that's going to come off. It's going to come off as water, and I don't want that to happen. Now, when you're looking at a leaf and you want to add veins into it, say your pattern doesn't have any, but you want to put them in there. If you look at the bottom of a leaf, or you imagine what the shape is on the bottom of that leaf, that's generally the way the veins run in it. So if you were looking at a holly leaf and they come up this way, it goes like this. If you're looking at a leaf like this, let's just picture that it ends in a curve like this at the bottom. My vein lines are going to come like this. So when I'm using a liner brush, I don't know if Neil's going to get this in here because this is going to be soft, but you can at least get the motion of what's happening here. I'm going to put in some very, very soft little lines. You want to draw your liner brush towards you as much as you can. It gives you more control over the pressure on your brush. And you don't want to put in 50,000 little lines on your, let's turn that one around, on your board, because then it just looks busy. 3, 4 on each side is lots. And it's fast. You don't have to take all day to do this. But it's also something that you can leave out if you don't, oops, wrong direction, if you don't think that you can handle it. It doesn't make any difference at all. Just adds a little more interest to your leaves. Okay, my leaves are all done now. I've got the first and second highlight on it. I've got the shadow on it, and I've got the shadow up the center, and I've got these little vein lines on. So that's enough detail on those guys. Now we're going to work on our strawberries, and we're going to do the same kind of thing. We're going to highlight one side, and we're going to shadow the other. And then we're going to do some cool dry brushing in the middle. So my highlight on these strawberries is actually the caribou that we used to bring out that second highlight on the leaves, and I'm going to float it again. So I've loaded my brush, and there it is, nice and soft. And now you're kind of thinking, why would she be putting yellow on red? Well, strawberries that aren't totally ripe have kind of a bit of an orange tinge to them, and by adding on the yellow, like this on the top side, we're going to give them the not quite ripe strawberry look. All right, so here we go, and we're going to do the top side again. This is our light source up here. Okay, and we're going to come over on this side. And then I'm going to just continue around my board, and I'm just doing the top half. Okay, and here we go. We've got our highlights coming on here. They're looking pretty good. And I'm only going to the halfway point on the bottom here. If you think about it, just kind of divide your strawberry in half. So that's our highlights. That's looking pretty good. We don't want them too bright, but they need to be there. There's no point in putting them on if you can't see what you're doing. So those are looking pretty good on there. So now I'm going to put on a shadow, and this one's going to go on the opposite side. So we've got the light coming in from the top and the shadow on the bottom. And we're going to do that with the black green. Now remember, we mixed the black green with the lighter green for our shadow color here, so we're using the same stuff on our palette. Black green, and we're floating it. Ooh, there it is, nice and soft. Touch on here to control it. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn my board the other direction, and I'm going to pull the black green around on the bottom, have it come over, touch, and clean it up. A little bit more color than that, but not much. Now this black green is one of these shadows that I'm only going to do once, because I'm going to come back in and I'm going to put a C-stroke in here with black green again, so that will strengthen it. So I only want to do these guys once. Don't want them to take over. All right, I'm just finishing up the last shadow on the strawberry. So it's the bottom half we've shadowed. Don't worry too much about anything else on this yet. Let's just strengthen that one just a little bit. There it is. All right. Well, there's the first shadow. So now all of a sudden our strawberries are starting to take on a little bit of a shape here, a little bit of form happening. Let's hold it up like that. That's coming up really nice. Really nice. All right. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to come back in again with that black-green float. Remember I said I was going to do it a second time, but this time I'm going to do a C-stroke. And I am going to come in. I always want to turn my board so that I'm doing the letter C. If you're left-handed, you actually do the mirror image of the letter C, so you would turn your board going the opposite direction. Right? You might paint towards the outside, and I'm going to paint it out. Scoop it in at the fat part there, clean it up a little bit, and that's what's going to happen. Can you see that, Neil? Yeah, I get a thumbs up. You can see this. All right. So I'm going to go from the fat part on this guy, because remember, I don't want my hand in the way. I can go from the top to the bottom or the bottom to the top, as long as I stay in this little fat part of the strawberry. And I'm on the shadow side. Over it goes. Okay, so now we've got the shadows on there. We're going to come in and we're going to do some dry brushing, which is, it's a lot of fun to do. It's an easy way to add in a shadow or a highlight, but there are a couple of things you need to know. First of all, you need to have a dry piece of paper towel. The key word in dry brushing is dry. There's no water. You don't wet your brush. You don't have a wet paper towel. There is no water anywhere in this. You can clean your brush at the very end, but you don't want to clean it halfway through. If you've got to do a couple of different colors, you want a couple of dry brushes. They're fairly stiff. This is a Scumbler, which is a really nice dry brush to use. But you can use fabric brushes that are stiff. Sometimes stencil brushes will work. You have to try them. Deerfoot stipplers work. They're a little softer and they take a little bit of practice, but they work very well. What you do is you come in, and we're going to use this. Well, we're not using that. We're going to use Caribou, but that one's dry. So put down a little bit more Caribou. We're going to come in and pick up paint in our brush, like that. We're going to come onto our palette. We're going to mushy, mushy, mushy that into our brush. You didn't know you were going to learn another language, did you? Well, here you go. Mushy, mushy, mushy into your brush. Now I've just ground that into my brush. Now I'm going onto my dry piece of paper towel, and I'm going to take off a fair amount of that paint. Okay? Doesn't look like I have a whole lot left on here. I'm going to come into the highlight side of my strawberry, but in the rounded section in here, not out on the edge, move in a little bit. And I'm going to just start to dry brush in some color. Now I need my strawberries need to be dry, my brush needs to be dry, my paper towel needs to be dry, everything needs to be dry. Thus, dry brushing. Ooh, isn't that too cool? Now the trick with dry brushing is you want to build the color up to where you want to see it. All right, so you can get some of these in, and you might want to go back and heighten the color just a little bit on them. It just makes them look rounded out. Bring that guy up just a little bit. How's that looking? Pretty good. All right, I'm done dry brushing. I can actually clean my brush because I'm not going to use that color anymore. Now remember at the end of your painting day to clean your brushes. You can buy special soap for your brushes, and you can get that at any of your Tole painting shops or folk art shops. But you can also use the soap beside your sink, your liquid dish soap. It doesn't work quite as well. The soaps that are made for cleaning your brushes actually have a bit of a conditioner in them, and they help that way. But there's another thing that you don't have to rush out and buy. All right, we've got this in here. We're going to finish these strawberries up with some line work. But it's not as wet as what we did when we were putting the little lines on our leaves. We're going to kind of come in here and load up this line brush. We're going to scoop a little bit just on the end. It's thicker. It's almost full-strength paint, thicker than what we were using before. What I'm going to do is put the seeds in. And I'm just going to kind of, this is on the highlight side. I'm just going to kind of touch and pull them down. Now I don't want these to line up like a little soldier, because seeds just don't sit in like that. Wait. I'm going to have to invest in a towel so this thing's not quite so loud. All right, so we're just finishing up on our little strawberry seeds, and they look great. They look really good. Almost good enough to eat. Almost, but not quite. All right, so today we have done We finished up our leaves that we had base coated in when we came in. We've highlighted and shadowed. We've added the vein lines in it, so we've done some liner work. And we've finished up our strawberries, so we've learned how to dry brush too. So that was a pretty good day. That was all right. So what I'm going to have done for next time when I come back is I'm going to have a wash of soft coal and velvet night, a little bit of a brush mix, but a wash on my daisies, because I want to start with a little bit of gray color in behind them. I want to have that come up through my white a little bit. It's going to form kind of a natural shadow. We're going to enhance that too, but it's going to add a bit of a natural shadow. And I also want to have my terracotta pots base coated in. So that's what I'm going to have done when I come back and see you the next time. So get on with your homework and happy painting. Welcome back to Tole Time. The last time we were together, I said I was going to do some homework, and I did. I was a good girl. I did my homework, so I'm going to flip this around so you can see what I did. We had finished up our strawberries and our leaves, and I said I was going to wash in the daisies with, it's called soft coal, and I used velvet night as well, just a hint of that, just to make it not quite so charcoaly. And all I did was wash the daisies in. And a wash is 80% water and 20% paint, so it's just colored water. It's just enough to give it a little bit of a background, a little bit of a hint of something else happening in there. I also base coated in my little leaves, and they're base coated in bay leaf. So I thought, you don't need to watch me base coat again, so I got those in there. I base coated in the terracotta pots, and they're in paprika. So I thought I'd get all that done ahead of time. It doesn't take anything to base coat. It's like a paint by number. You can do that at home on your own. So what we're going to start with today is I'm going to show you how to do some liner work. Now, if you've ever had trouble loading your liner brush, then you probably have too much paint or your paint is too thick. So I'm going to show you how to go about doing it on your palette, how to figure out if you have your paint the right consistency, and then how to hold your brush so that you're going to get some nice lines happening here. I have to do the little promotion thing. Since the last time I saw you, I just got my new brush, and it's called the Nancy Harron Special, so I have to throw that in there as a little promo thing. All right, so I've done the promotion thing. We're moving on. Moving on to the serious stuff now. So this is bay leaf that I'm using, and I'm using the Legacy paints, Legacy 1837. Now, I want to do these little lines that come out like this. They're the little curly Q lines. You can see them up on the pattern here. These little lines here. I just call them little vines. And I'm also going to pull them up into the leaves. Now, we're not going to see this little line too well on the leaf, but that's not a big deal. So that's what we're going to do. Now, to do this, what I have to do is I have to water my paint down, because if you look at this little brush, it has about 3 hairs. So you have to have your paint watered down to actually have it come off of here. I'm not doing stroke work, I'm doing line work, so it's a different load. So I start out by wetting my brush, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come into the side of my puddle of paint, and I'm going to touch and press. See this water that's dropping off here? Off of my brush? I'm just pulling paint into that, and what I'm doing is forming a whole new consistency of paint. I don't want to wreck this little puddle of paint, because I may need to go into that for something. I'm not sure what, but you know, you just never know what I might do. All right, now to decide if I have the right consistency of paint on my brush, what I want to do is look at it and see if it has changed size. If it's thicker than when I started, then I know that my paint is too thick. all I want it to do is change color. So it's kind of green now because I'm in bay leaf, so it's a green color. So it hasn't changed size, it's only changed color. I know I've got the right consistency of paint. Now I need to give the first little tap on here because that first drop that comes off is water and it's going to go on your project and you don't want that to happen. I have to sit down to do this. All right, when you're using a liner brush, what you want to have happen is you want to use your liner brush up and down. It's almost like a flagpole. You don't have to be really rigid. But by holding it up and down, you're going to have less pressure on the back of your bristles and it's going to give you a finer line. Now I don't want these to be so fine that I can't see them, so I'm going to relax just a little bit. I'm going to come down to my project, get my brush where I want it to be. I'm going to lock my fingers in. I'm going to lock my wrist. I don't want to be doing this because that changes the pressure on my brush. So I'm going to lock my wrist. And I'm going to kind of move from my elbow and my shoulder, and I'm going to do this kind of a, that's really exaggerated, but I'm going to get those Wilco elbows in there, and I'm going to get moving. They're not going to be close to my body. So, and I want to tend to pull these towards myself. I'm going to start where they originate, which is in behind the project, in back here. So I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but. And one fell swoop. Now these lines on here, I always tell my students they're just vague suggestions of where you go, where you want to be. You don't have to worry about being right on top of those lines because what you can do after is we're going to erase the pattern and nobody's going to know anyways. So I'm going to have, notice how my board just keeps on flipping all the way through this? Always. Running out of paint here. So I just come back in when I run out of paint. I do the same thing. I make a whole new consistency of paint there. This could be tricky. Come back over top of a line. Ooh, and she is good. Yeehaw. There it is. All right. I'm going to go this way. Get that guy in there. This guy over here. So all of these little guys, all of these leaves that I had base coated on, they all now are getting little stems, so they don't look like they're just hanging out there in nowhere land. Now I need to also pull from that curlicue line up into these little leaves so that they've got some little stems coming off of there too, and they're not just kind of hanging out there in nowhere land. All right, one more to go here. Let's give this guy some connectors. And this guy down here. There he is. This guy's got 3 little leaves off of him. 1, 2, and 3. All right. Now, what that's added to our project is just added a little bit of movement. Everything's not laying out flat on our project now. We've got some of this curl thing happening, and it's working really good. All right, the next thing we're going to work on is we're going to put our daisies together. So, like I said, I used a wash of soft coal and velvet night in here on all the daisies. I just did each petal separately. Now I'm going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to get this brush out. This is a number 6 short liner. You can use a number 3 round, number 4 round, number 5 round if you want. Some people like to use a filbert, which is like this one. It's like a cat's tongue, shaped like that, and that gives you that nice rounded end. I like this number 6 short liner because I can carry a lot of paint on it and I can get done what I need to get done in one stroke. So, remember what I said, every time you start again you need to shake your paint up? So there we go. Now because I'm doing daisies, daisies can have ridges in them. You're really going to carry a lot of paint in these. And I'm going to do 2 strokes per petal on these to get them. I'll do one full daisy. I'll show you how I'm going to do it. And then I'll finish it up, and you don't need to be hanging around to watch all that. So I'm really going to load this brush up. I really want to carry lots of paint on this. So I'm going to start on the outside edge here of the petal, touch and press, and as I move towards the center, I'm going to release the pressure. And I only want to come into the center, just bump up to it. I don't want to actually eliminate the center. And I'm going to do that, all right? And I'm going to reload. I'm going to turn my brush, and I'm going to continue to pull those petals in like that. You can see how those are forming. Now, I don't mind having that paint drop off on the edge of these ones. It actually makes it look quite nice. See how I reload pretty much every single time? If I'm lucky, I can get 2 petals out of one load, but I want to keep it so that my brush will keep fanning out really nice for me. And if I run out of paint or I run out of moisture on my brush, meaning water, it won't fan, and I'm going to have to really press. This way, I'm hardly having to press at all. I just add a little bit extra pressure. Swing that around. And see if I do add a little bit of pressure on my brush, how it will fan out, and if I release the pressure, how it does come back in and narrows off again. Okay, so that's the beginning of the daisy. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to finish these up, and I'll be back when I'm done. Okay, so I've done all my base coating, and I've only gone once. I've done 2 strokes per petal, but I've only done it once. And the reason I've only done it once, and the reason I did the soft coal and velvet night in behind, is what I wanted to have happen. If you have a look at this little daisy over here, I want that kind of gray color to bleed up naturally through the white. And that's going to start to form our shadows, and without us actually having to do anything. If we really truly wanted, these have turned out really well. We could probably leave them, but we're going to go one more step. And I'm going to use evergreen. I don't want that to flip out at me. All right, I'm going to use evergreen. And I'm going to float this next color on. So I'm going to adjust my water in my brush. First float of the day, this might not work. There we go. Oh, yes. And there she is. Touch it on there. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat each petal individually. And I'm going to put a little bit of green color around the center at the, whoa, get stabbed by my board, at the base of each petal. But I'm treating them all individually. You can see I'm starting and stopping on each petal. This is probably making Neil nauseous here, having this thing spin this much when he's looking through the camera lens. All right. So that's what we're going to shoot for, right there. And I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do it on all of them. And I'll be back. Okay, I got all my shadowing on here. And when I do a float, I like to do them twice. So I've gone through and I've strengthened these, and now they're up to what I want them to do. What I've done is I've created a little bit of shadow at the center, and it's going to start to make the petals look like they're leaning in a little bit towards the center. So now I'm going to use Caribou, just this nice little yellow color here, and I'm going to paint in the centers. And this is just a base coat, and when you base coat, you need a little bit of moisture on your brush. You don't want to go in with full strength paint. And you're going to come in, you're just going to grab in the edges of those daisies. You want all that rough stuff gone. Just grab them in like that. And you move on to the next one. Now, what you don't do is you don't go back in and play in wet paint, because it will peel itself, and it makes this hole that is just about impossible to fill in. You have to get in there and tip-tap paint, and it's a hassle. My girls used to say, Nancy can fix anything. Well, that's one thing that's a real challenge, I have to tell you. I can fix it, but better not to. So we're going to do these once, we're going to let them dry, and then we're going to do them again. So, all right, we're going to use brown iron oxide, and we're actually going to put a shadow in on this, and I don't know if you can see it on here, but it's going to go on the bottom of the daisy center. And what we're going to do, we're going to put it in with a C stroke. Now, what I'm going to do on these, and on the pattern, there's not a, we're coming in over here. On the pattern, I have this little line scooped in the center on these daisies. And what that indicates is that there is a second scoop in towards the top of the daisies, so it forms like a little cup in there. Now that's optional, you don't have to put that in. I'll put it in on here, and I think it's in, yeah, it's in on here. I'll put it in on here and I'll show you how to do it. But if you're not comfortable doing a small C-stroke, don't put it in. They look very nice without them as well. So this is floated again. Now when you pick up a darker color, when your colors start to get dark, you can pick up less paint because it's harder to float out. And if you pick up the same amount of paint on a dark color, you're going to be there for days trying to get that sucker to soften out for you. Little C-stroke, just on the bottom here. There we go, and I'm going to tuck it right down on the bottom, come up, touch it to clean it up. Could use a little bit more color. Now, like I said, I like to do my floats twice. Whether it's a shadow or a highlight, doesn't matter. I like to do them twice. So I'm going to put these on one time here on each daisy. See how I get my fingers on there? Because when I come up out of this C-stroke, I'm going to leave a little bit of water behind with a touch of color in it. And I like to get my fingers down on the board just to get that cleaned off a little bit. Otherwise it leaves all these messy ends hanging around. And if you don't get it off while it's still damp, then you might as well forget it. You can't get it off later. So you have to be constantly aware. To keep your project nice and clean, you want to be aware of what you're doing. So it's a good motto for life, be aware of what you're doing. Okay, let's see if we're dry enough to do this again. Ooh, look at that. That just makes that center pop out a little bit. When I float on my project, on here I press when I'm working it into my brush, but when I'm actually on the project, I don't press very hard at all. I just kind of skim over it. Works really well. You may hear a few different noises in here. My dog has joined us, so she seems to think. I think we have to put her up on the credits there, Neil. We have to run her in as something, artistic director or something. All right, that's looking good. See how I use the back end of my brush? I use it as an eraser because in theory there's nothing back there but water. And we're hoping theory is a good thing. We're hoping it actually is there. All right, now I'm going to try and do these little scoops up at the top. So it's the same color, and I'm going to do the same stroke. I'm just going to make it smaller, and I'm going to move it up to the top half. So if I come in on this guy, I would have come in and did this first C-stroke here, and then all I do is just slide up a little bit. And I just scoop it in, take the back end of my brush and just clean it up just a little bit. Gives this little cup here. So I would have done it there. I'm going to slide up, and there it is there. Now you could actually go down to a smaller brush to do this, but the bigger the brush, the softer your float. And this last guy over here. Whoop. You don't want to do that. That's not what you want to hear either, is it? Put that back in. Slide up. There it is. All right, see? Spit's a wonderful thing. All right, so that gives these guys that little cup that's happening there. Now what I'm going to do to just finish these off, I like to work and get things done. If I'm working just like we did the leaves, they were finished, we finished the strawberries. We still have to put the leaves on, but that's okay, we'll do that at the end. But I'd like to get these finished, so I'm going to put some little caribou dots on here. And when you're doing dot work, you want to do it with a fresh spot of paint. You don't want to have to break in on a cap of paint. This is a stylus, and this is what we use to trace our pattern out with. And now I'm going to use it for dot work. So I just come in here. And I'm doing this upside down so you guys can kind of see it. Just going to randomly dot. And I'm going to drop some of this pollen because that's basically what I'm creating out there a little bit. Now if I wanted to, I could add in some brown iron oxide dots on this as well. I think on this one I'll just leave them with these little yellow dots, caribou. Now I'm just randomly putting them on. I'm not overdoing it. I'm not going too nuts on this. Because this can get away from you. You can make this take over. All right. There we go. I'm going to just wipe this paint off my stylus. And those guys are done. Okay, I'm going to give them a minute or two to dry because I don't want to drag my hand through. Okay, I'm back. Things are dry and I just rolled my brush through the paint, so oh well. Too much coffee, Neil says, and he should know because he's drinking coffee. I'm going to dry brush some highlights. Our daisies are done. We're going to move on to our terracotta pots, and I'm going to dry brush on some highlights on here. So notice how I'm painting upside down. That's pretty clever, eh? I do so many demonstrations and teaching that I have a really hard time painting with a project facing me the proper direction. On dry brushing, we did a little bit of dry brushing on here, so we'll just do a quick review. I go in with my scumbler or whatever I'm going to use for dry brushing. Pick up paint, come off here. Remember the thing here is dry brushing. Everything's dry. Come over onto my paper towel. Actually, I'll get out a dry one so that you can see. You won't be able to see the paint probably in the camera coming off because this is cremette. But I'm taking off most of the paint on a dry piece of paper towel, not on my wet one, because I don't want any extra stuff coming in here. Now I'm going to just really gently dry brush some highlights across my pot. And this time I'm coming across the pot. And I'm going to give some up on the lip here. That's kind of cool. Now this guy's going to run this way because he's broken and he's laying down here. I'm going to run it that way across him. Just for fun. That looks like about enough. Now you don't wash your dry brush until you're sure you've got it at the brightness that you want, because if you wash it, then of course you have to go find another dry brush, and that could take a while. Yep, that looks good. Okay, would you love me to say the pots are done now? Oh, they're just about done. These are really easy. All these they're base coated, they're dry brushed with cremette, and we're going to do a shadow of brown iron oxide, and bingo, you're going to have some pots. My kind of painting. Easy, easy. All right. Now, I already had the brown iron oxide out because I used it on my daisy center, so now I'm going to go ahead and do it again. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to float underneath this lip. I need to get it where my lights aren't shining so I can actually see what I'm doing. I don't know if my hand's probably in the way, but I'll do it and then I'll show you. Now, by doing that, all I did was lift the lip up over the rest of the pot. It's kind of cool. Shadows make things move back, so by having the shadow actually drop onto the pot as opposed to running this direction, it pushes this part of the pot back a little bit. So we'll do the same thing over here. Make sure I got my paint on the right side. Now, I'm not worried about these berries that I haven't base coated in. I'm going to shadow right through those, because when I come to base coat them in, you're not going to see that anyways. There we go. We'll let that dry and we'll strengthen it, because like I said, I like to do them twice, so we'll strengthen that. But now, even though I don't have these grapes painted in yet, just to save myself a little bit of time, I'm going to come in and do a real quick shadow, just kind of tucking it in and around. I can fix this up if I need to after I get the grapes painted in. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not. Can you see that, Neil? No. Yeah, he's not speaking. He's afraid I'll hand the mic over to him. All right, let's see. We're going to give this guy a little bit of a shadow. Anything that is on top of something else would create a shadow. So that's what I'm doing. I'm just looking to see what's up on top And I'm dropping a shadow in behind it. All right, that gives me an idea of where it's going to be, like that. Now I'm going to come along, and what I want to do is I want to strengthen the shadow that's underneath that lip just a little bit. It could be a little bit darker. And that happens when you go in and do it a second time. It also softens it out a little bit. There we go. Not bad. Now we'll just do this guy over here one more time, and our pots are done. All right. There we go. Now that was just way too easy. Let's see, where else should we do a shadow? Let's just drop one across the bottom here, just so that it looks like it's going to be a little bit connected to the ground. We're going to later go in and put ground in behind, and we'll just put a little bit over there, just so it looks like it's in behind. And these guys here too, kind of across like that, and just a little bit. Nothing too exciting, just enough to make it look kind of dirty on there. These have had plants in them at some point, and they've had the water come through, and now they've got that dirty look to them too. All right, so we've got this far on here, and according to my cheat sheets, that's all we're going to do today. What I'm going to have done for the next time is I'm going to have my grapes base coated in, and I'm going to use plum and velvet night. It's just a brush mix, which means you pick up both colors on your brush and you paint them in, and I'm going to paint each individual grape in so that I kind of keep the feel of that. I'm also going to have my little berries base coated in, and we'll go from there. So until we see you next time, happy painting. Heidi-ho, neighbor. I had to throw that in for Neil. Welcome back to Tole Time. Today we are going to finish up our project, actually. Well, that's the theory. We're going to try and finish up our project. I did my homework again. What a good girl I am. I base coated in my grapes, and I did them all separately. So each little grape I did as one grape. So what I did was, I thought I would show you how to do this. As Neil pointed out, that I told you to do it, but I didn't show you how, so we're going to show you how. I used plum and velvet night, and I did what's called a brush mix. I don't like putting my paints together in one pile, like this one on top of this one, because you just might find that you get too much plum and, oh, gee, then you need to add more velvet night, and then you need more plum, and blah, 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 yada, 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 and you have a pile of paint this big. Well, you don't need a pile of paint that big. This also, I don't know if you can actually see it, but it adds a variety of color through here depending on which one you happen to pick up the most of. So you come in and pull out a little bit of plum and scoop a little bit of this velvet night, and out here where you've mixed it, you just really lightly brush mix it in. And when you come back in to reload your brush, you just go into whichever one you want to go into. So you would come on and you would just, I'll just paint this top one again. You would just paint your berries in. You paint them in one at a time, and then you'd come back and reload. Maybe you load a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, and back on you go. And then that gives you what I've got here. Now I haven't worried about it being really solid or not being able to see a little bit of my base coat color through. I've got 2 coats on here, and that's good for what I'm going for. The other thing I did while I was away drank a lot of coffee, I base coated these little berries, and I base coated them in Delft blue. No, I lied. I base coated them in Dover blue, and I'm going to highlight them in Delft blue. You can pick any blue you want for this, whatever goes with your house, if anything. You know, you might decide that you want these to be a different color. And if you do, just try and stay with something that's going to go with your board. It doesn't matter what color you choose, just as long as it doesn't overpower your board. These look pretty bright right now, but by the time we get done with them, they will have darkened up and dropped back a little bit. So we're going to start with our grapes. Now, I've got them base coated in. This guy, I've got to let him dry, so I'll start on this one over here. I'm going to start by highlighting the top of each grape with amethyst, which is quite a bright color. But I want it to show up a little bit, and I'm going to float this on like I do most of my shadows and highlights. So when I'm floating, I only just need a pin drop of paint. I have my brush out all ready to roll. And pick it up. Get a nice float going here. Hopefully she works. Oh, look at that. And bang. It's soft. There we go. Sound like that cooking guy. Bang! All right. Now, I'm not going to put my pattern back on. And if I turn this around so that I can see it, I can actually see where pretty much each individual grape is. This is going to be where my light is coming from. So if I come in here and I just float across the top of each grape, I'm going to have them start to form in here. Oh, and then there's one in there like that. This guy sits over here kind of like that. You can see how they're starting to lift up off of each other. You can come in and kind of fake some of those grapes in too if you can't exactly see where they are. See, if I bring that one like that, it lays it over top. I'm going to tuck that guy in behind. This guy's going to go here. And he actually sits kind of up on top, so we're going to roll him in like that. Right? Maybe just turn my board a little bit so that it catches some light here and I can see where each little one is. And then this guy sits out here all by himself. We're going to give him a little stem in the end. All right, let's see if we can get these bottom guys rolled in here. Okay, this guy to me looks like he's up on top a little bit, so we're going to kind of zick him in there, and this guy too. Now, I'm going to roll a little bit of highlight onto these bottom ones here. Just a little bit. There. Now, if I turn that around like that, you can actually see these individual grapes starting to take shape. And I'm going to finish it up with some highlights that are going to be dry brushed on, but I'm also going to add the shadows. And when I add the shadows, that will really make this start to stand apart and come. But I can get this going here like this. So I'm going to work on this guy. I'll get him in and I'll be back. Okay, we're back, and I've put the highlights on my grapes here, and you can kind of see how they've started to form. So I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to dry brush. Seems to me all I get you guys to do is dry brush. Remember, the key is dry. I'm going to take most of that off of there. And you notice as I've been doing this dry brushing, I have all sorts of different sizes of brushes I can use for dry brushing, and they definitely come in handy. I'm just going to come on here just a little bit, kind of the top half of the grape. And I'm just going to strengthen that highlight just a little bit. You really can't see too much of it. It's possibly because I took all the paint off my brush, but we'll say because that's what it's supposed to be. There we go. You really don't want a lot of paint left on your brush, but you also don't want to take it all off. That just kind of defeats the purpose. Okay, see that one compared to that one? It's starting to look a little bit more rounded, a little more exciting. If grapes can be exciting, this is exciting. All right, here we go. A little dry brushing on these guys too. And you can see how much effort I put into this. Like this is rocket science here. Just lay that in there. Okay, now I'm not going like this. I'm not forming this little bullseye because that's exactly what it would look like. It would come out like a little bullseye, and we don't want that. I'm kind of, if I'm really exaggerating it, I'm doing this with it. I'm swooshing it on there. All right? Now remember what I said, you don't clean your brush of that color. Well, you don't clean your brush until you're totally satisfied you have your dry brushing up to the level where you want it. I do, I clean it. All right, so now we're going to do some shadowing, and we're going to put it in with Payne's Gray. Now, fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, the best Payne's Gray I've found is Delta Ceramcoat Payne's Gray. It's a really good color. It works on blues. You can use it on reds. It just works really well. But it's one of these colors that will follow you home if you load too much on your brush. So you only want a little pin drop of it because it's one of those dark colors. I'd rather put some on my brush, walk it, find out I need a touch more paint, and go back in and pick it up like I just did there, than put too much on, have to go in, clean my brush, and then start all over again. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to come in behind these grapes. So now I'm in behind them or I'm underneath them, whatever the grape is needing to lift it off of the other grapes. Yeah, that's starting to work. Now you need to be turning your board all the time when you're doing this because you need to be able to see which one actually sits behind or on top, whichever way you happen to look at it, so that you can put the color in behind. All right, if you look at this bunch of grapes and look at this bunch of grapes, you can see how this one over here has started to, better have started to come to life because we're just about done. It's got a little more dimension than this guy over here because of the shadows. So I'll get this in. Okay, you didn't get to have coffee time because unless you hit your pause button, you didn't get that. I, on the other hand, get it. I don't have to hit the pause time, we just edit it. All right, so I have got my shadows on here, and I've got my first and second highlights. So I've got the highlight that I floated on and the highlight that I dry brushed in. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little Nancy Harron special brush. Got to just point that out. Just got to keep adding that in. And I am going to come up in this highlighted area, and I'm just going to add a little ticks in there of this amethyst. And all that's doing is giving me a very bright spot. And you want that in your highlight area. You don't want that anywhere else. That's just in that highlighted area. And all that does is just saying that, yes, your light is hitting here. So that's good. You can use that. Looks good. Darn fine. Darn fine. So I am going to give myself some stems here. And I'm going to use brown iron oxide. And because grape stems, well, they can be kind of brown tones, green tones, whatever you want to do them in. I've just picked one of my greens. I actually picked evergreen. Brown iron oxide, I'm going to do a little bit of brush mixing. Come up with an ugly color. It's kind of a browny, greeny, gray thing. And all I'm going to do is just paint this stem in while Doesn't have to be anything terrific, but they do need to have a stem. So you can make it more brown if that's what you like, or you can make it more green. And because you're brush mixing, that's up to you. That's going to be what you choose it to be. There we go. I'm going to even leave it kind of streaky. I'm only going to put them in once. So there we've got stems, and our grapes are done. Yep, according to my cheat sheet, our grapes are done. Okay, we're going to move on to our blueberries, and I base coated them in Dover blue, and now I'm going to use Delft blue to highlight them. And there again, that highlight sits up to the top. I'm pretending that my light is coming from up at this top curve here. And I'm going to highlight them. Now, we were talking about the board just before we came on here, and Neil pointed out that this board is routered and this board is not. Now, according to your pattern, you have the room to add the routering in. It's just a rounded edge router in here. You can do that. I'm kind of afraid of the router, so I don't want to be doing anything that might hurt me. So what I thought I would do is I would leave this one plain, and I'm still going to use the paprika and finish in around the edges. You just won't see it quite as much. And to show you that this one has the routered edge, this one doesn't, that you can do it either way. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever you get done. And you can cut the pattern for this from your line drawing. You have enough room to, up here, to router it. So you can do either or. It's one of those choice things. I like to give you a little bit of choice. Okay, now this is just floated. Oh, isn't that nice? Now that's just going to add that little bit of brightness to the top of our berries. Just going to soften it in there. Remember what I said, I like to do my shadows and highlights when they're floated in. I like to do them twice. So I'm going to put them in, let them dry, and I'm going to go back and do them again. And when you do that, that just tends to soften them out. Makes them look just that much nicer. It also strengthens them. So it makes them a little bit brighter. So you don't want to go too crazy on the brightness to begin with. You want to have it so that you can see it. You have to think that paint dries about 40% darker than what you put it on. So it's going to fade in there a little bit. I think we're dry. We'll go again. Oh, yes. Works very nicely. There we go. It's just a C-stroke up here. This one's down there, not quite dry. There we go. All right, so we're going to let those dry. And then we're going to put a shadow on there. Now you can use a couple of different colors on this. You can use Payne's Gray, which is what I have written up in the instructions. Or if you want, you can use Velvet Night, depending on which way you want to go. Now I do have the Payne's Gray written in, but I'm going to try Velvet Night so that you can see the difference. And so you already know the Payne's Gray works. So let's just hope that this works too. Yuck. Now stop those little things from capping on the top of your paint. Really, all you have to do is wait for the paint to go back into the bottle. I get kind of impatient and don't wait for it to drop down, so I end up with this great huge cap on the top of my paint. All right, so now I have to turn my board this way because now I'm doing a shadow. Make sure those are dry. Oh, that's nice. That works well. Velvet Night. On this picture over here, I've got it done in Payne's Gray. So now you know either one of them will work very nicely. Now when we started out with this blue, it looked quite bright on our board. But once you get the shadow on there, it just changes the whole color. Little Q-tip to clean that up. There we go. Q-tips are great things, and they should always be in your painter kit. So if I have anything coming out on the outside, like this little blurb there, it's gone. I don't need to worry so much about having any color come out the back side of my brush if the back side of my brush actually sits outside of what I'm painting on. And that allows me to use a little bit bigger brush than what you might think you want to use, because you take the Q-tip and you just clean it up. The bigger the brush, the softer the float. So you don't want to you want to try and stay away from floating on a 1/4 inch angle or anything much less than about a 10 flat. You really should try for a bigger brush. And if you need to do stuff like clean up with a Q-tip, that works too. All right, these are coming up nice. Now to finish up these berries, I'm going to give them a little highlight dot. And I'm going to put it in with white, just to give them a little bit of a brightness to them. Plus it helps to pull the white in from the daisies as well. Ooh, there's one of those things. Now, if I were just to stop and let the paint go back in, that would be far too easy, so we just won't even dwell on that one. All right. Now, up in the highlights section, obviously, is where this little dot needs to go. And that just doesn't take very much to put it in at all. So there's our little dot. So those berries are finished. All right, now, if we're looking at this project, what's happening right now is our project is kind of floating above the board. So we're going to have it connect. And for that, I want a nice wide brush. So I'm going on to like a 16 flat. I quite often use a 20. You guys would probably panic picking that up, but it's a good brush to use. They're nice and wide. Give you lots of room to float on and lots of play with water out the back of your brush. So when you're floating with the brush this big, breathing is always a good thing. You just relax and breathe. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to float along the bottom here, like this. I'm not going to make it one solid line. Just going to keep it out of my daisies if I can. I'm just going to float it in like this. Make it look a little bit like ground up and under. This is with brown iron oxide that I've used here. And if I just run it kind of like that, a little bit of an angle on my brush, I'm going to have it float off. Just tuck it underneath there, pick it up here. Now don't come up and around stuff. That doesn't look like it's natural. So just float it flat, and if you run into something, erase it and continue on. And it's going to make it look like you have, your ground is on different levels here. It's going to make it look like you have all these neat things on different levels too, if you can scoot a little bit of color in there. Okay, then I go back and have a look at them and see if I need to strengthen any of these ones. And this one here can use some strengthening. But the rest, well, it doesn't look too bad. I'm going to make sure that these strawberries right up here are on something. They look like they were floating out in the middle of nowhere. And this guy back here actually looks like he's floating. So if I can just kind of maneuver a little bit of ground in there. Now I need to go into this daisy, but I got my handy dandy Q-tip, so it doesn't matter. I don't want it to just sit out there and look like it's started and stopped at certain points. So if you start into your leaf or start into your grape and then just erase it, it's going to look like it comes in behind. And that helps that. I think this is coming up really, really nice here. Now, I think as far as our painting goes, oh, I know what I was going to tell you too. Actually, I just did this because it's just painted in. I put the little green leaves on. It only shows on 2 strawberries, and I just put that in with bay leaf. I just painted them in, so that was not a big deal. Now, if I wanted to, I can take bay leaf. Now, you don't have to do this, but if you want to, you can give these guys. You're going to use your liner brush. And you can give them just little stems that actually, okay, there you go. You've got 1 strawberry you could give a stem to. Just looks like he's fallen off the little vine there, and he's just laying there. There you go. That worked. Now, I tend to leave my little berries hanging out there in no man's land. I kind of like them floating in the air. That's neat. Now, if we have finished our painting, we need to sign it. You need to sign it somewhere. Now, some of you guys like to sign it on the back, and that's great. But I like to sign it up on the front somewhere, and I don't put my name in great huge letters anywhere. I just write Harron somewhere. I try and do it on one of these little curlicues or something, and I use my liner brush, which distresses my ladies very much. They want to use those little Pigma pens, which you can use. But I always figure if you use your liner brush, then you know how to do it. And if your Pigma pen runs out of ink, you're not out of luck. I also don't like my name to be the focal point of anything. I want the picture I've done to be the focal point, but I also want people to know that I've done it, so I've got to add that in there. So now what you do is you go back and you look at it, and you see, is there anything else that I want to add in? So let me have a little look here. Now, on this one here, and I think I'll do that too, I've added some paprika dots on there just to pull the paprika from the pot in through. And because I'm going to do the outside edge in paprika too, it's just kind of a nice way to pull all that through. So now I'm just going to use the handle of my brush. It makes really good dots. Let's get these put away a little bit. So if you just use this wooden handle here, and you just come along and you just do clusters of 3 dots somewhere. And you can put these random. They're just wherever you want them to be. And all it's doing is pulling this paprika color throughout the whole board. It doesn't look like I've just come in and picked up a color out of nowhere. And these are random. I can't see my project there. I don't know exactly where I've put them on there. They've just been added randomly on there as well. So that's cool. That's cool. Okay, we'll let that dry. And I don't want to mess around with it because dots take a long time to dry. So I'm going to use my blow dryer. I'm going to dry those. You guys can pause and go for a coffee if you want. And come on back. Neil's cheering. He wants to go for coffee. I'm going to take my pattern off, and I'm going to show you how to finish up the edge. And then we're going to spray it with the varnish. And well, actually, I'm going to brush it on. It's a rotten day outside. I'm not going outside to spray anything. And you need to do a spray varnish in a well-ventilated area. So I'm going to do some brush varnish on here. We're going to show you how to do that. And we'll call this puppy done. All right, I'll be back in a minute. Okay, we're back. My little dots are dry, and I was playing on the edge here. You can see that I've started to base coat it. I'll do it twice, but you don't need to hang around for that. Now, when I do base coating, never use your shaders, because when you're painting with them like this, you're wearing the bristles down on the sides, and you get all these little hairs that stick up, kind of like this guy. I'll just really mush him up, but really exaggerated. That's what happens. So you don't ever use your good shader brush. I hate to send you out to buy a base coat brush, but that's pretty much what you need to do until you have your brushes wear out to a point where they become base coat brushes. So this used to be a good shader. Well, now it's a good base coat brush. So I did that. Now my dots are dry, and I'm going to go on and take the pattern off. And it's really simple. You can, with the graphite paper, you can use an eraser, and that will take it off. Or you can use odorless thinner, and this works really good too. So you just take it on a lint-free rag, and you just take and run it across like this. It's going to take off any pattern that we haven't painted over, but it doesn't touch your paint, so that's really kind of neat. So any pattern I've got left showing on here is going to hit the road, I hope. I tell you a lot of theory, don't I? It just doesn't always come true. There we go. Oh yeah, that's nice. There we go. Take that all off like that. So now when my neighbor says to me, did you use a pattern for that? Of course I'm going to say, well, no, I freehanded it. You know, they don't need to know. Just hide the pattern. Hide the pattern, hide the video. You can say, oh no, by golly, I designed that myself. There you go. So that looks really good. Now there's different kind of varnishes that you can use, and there's different brands of varnishes, and you pick what you would like to use. I'm just going to use this liquid one here for today. And you never shake a liquid varnish. You either roll it like this or you rock it back and forth. You don't want to have little bubbles forming up in there. And I quite often use the Legacy Spray varnish, which I really like in a matte. But like I said, it's not a nice day outside today. And you need to be outside to do that. You need to be out where it's well ventilated. Or in the garage. Neil doesn't want to move his camera, so we'll just do this. Now, when you're doing this varnish, this makes a really nice job of varnishing too. You use a big, wide, flat brush. And you use long, long strokes. Don't use little choppy strokes, because they'll show. Use nice, long strokes. And you want to put on more than one coat, but you need to let it dry in between, and you need to let it dry up good. So as soon as it starts getting tacky, you don't want to play in it, because then it does what paint does. It peels itself. So that's not a good thing. Well, Martha Stewart, she wouldn't like that one. That's not a good thing. All right, this is looking very nice. So you just have a little look at it to see where it's shiny and where it's not. Where it's not, you obviously haven't hit it with varnish. I'm just going to go like this to get rid of any little short choppy lines that I've got in there, and I'm going to let that dry. Now, I'm not going to leave the varnish in my brush because it'll become hard, and then my brush will be toast. So I'm going to clean my brush out too. Put my varnish aside. I can blow dry this, and I could come back in and I'll do it 2 more times. You also don't need to watch that because that's just varnishing. So with this project, we have done all sorts of neat things. We've learned how to go right from scratch, right from prepping our wood, all the way up to finishing it. So we're going to let that dry. Now, Neil pointed out that I should do the little promo thing here, so I'm going to. I have to do this. I'm going to move this up, let that dry. Don't want to get your fingers on that because that's going to muck up. I have these books that I wrote. Here, we'll just put them that way so Neil can get at them. I write under the name of Harron's Nest, and these books are all geared to beginner/intermediate painters. So if you have even the slightest knowledge on how to float, you can paint out of these books. They give you lots of colored pages inside. They give you worksheets to go from. Each book has worksheets like this. Where do you want me, Neil, so it's not glaring? They have a step-by-step. In the instructions, I tell you how to do this, and if you get lost, in you go. As far as contacting me, I seem to have moved a lot in the last 3 years. Go out of the last book, volume 3, and my address, my email address is in there, and my home address, and feel free to write me a note or drop me a line on email. So there we go with the books. So I've done the promotion thing. I promoted the brush. I promoted the books. Life is good. Life is fine. We've done this. This is cool. This book is on the endangered book list because it's now out of print. You may find it at your local Tole shop. If not, I might have the only ones left in the world. Who knows? So you can give me a holler if you want one of those ones and you can't find it. I'll put those away. So when this is all dry, I'm going to put some little tacks in the back, and I'm going to connect on some jute. And Merry Christmas, Neil. This is your Christmas present, because how many of these do I need? So we hope to see you again. Hope you've learned something on here. Hope I haven't put you to sleep. And we'll see you again the next time on Tole Time. Thanks. See you later.